Hello there, welcome to Chess Idea. Today we are going to see a game between Karjakin and Anand from this Altibox Norway Championship 2018 and this game is from round 9. So let's start the game. d4 by Karjakin and Anand replied with knight to f6, Indian game. c4, e6, knight to f3, d5, knight to c3, bishop to e7, bishop to f4 and short castle. e3, c5 and d takes c and bishop takes c5. Queen to c2, the intention is about a long castle. Knight to c6, a3, queen to a5 and long castle by Karjakin and knight to e4. Now the knight to e4 actually targeting this square, particularly f2, so that it can gain either rook from here, but this is actually an inaccuracy in terms of stockfish analysis. Instead of knight to e4, the best move was bishop to e7. Well, then the continuation, most probably king to b1, a6, c takes d, e takes d5, h3, bishop to e6, knight to g5 and rook a to c8. There is a clear line, so bishop to d3, h6 to kick out the knight, knight takes e6 and f takes e6 and bishop to g6. Though you can see this combination according to stockfish gives black a huge advantage over here, but still just go back to our main position where black actually played white actually played a long castle and the response from black was knight to e4. So knight to b5, again it's according to stockfish it's a inaccurate move. The best move over here is knight takes e4. The probable combination then may be like this: queen takes e4, bishop takes a3, b takes a3, q takes a3 with check, and the position is quite open, though the advantage of white is quite we can see the advantages of white. The domination is quite noticing. Then king d2, e5, bishop takes e5, rook check and bishop to d4, queen to a5 with check, king to e2 and bishop to f5. So maybe engine have more idea to play in such position more violently, but for a human being I feel knight b5 is just fine. So just back to our main position where it was knight to e4 from Anand and the reply was knight to b5. a6 was played by Anand. Well, a6 is quite good, but there is another variation we can take consideration into, and the variation is bishop takes a3. In that case, obviously if you take it with your own knight, then the variation becomes knight to b4, queen to b1, knight takes f2, and you probably lose one of your rook. Another possibility is pawn b takes a3 and then most probably a6. Now if you play your bishop on this c7, then b6 is quite protective and knight b to d4 may be threatening this knight, but now you can give a check with a3, and when queen just block the check, then you just exchange the queen, king takes b2 and knight takes d4. The knight has already dropped. Well, rook takes d4 and now knight takes f2, so you have already gained a pawn and there is a tempo. White will try to stop the invasion of knight. He will try to save his rook by playing this g1, and if mistakenly he played like bishop takes b6, then there is a pin for the bishop. You cannot save the bishop. Okay, then the move will be continued like that: rook to g1, bishop to b7, bishop takes b6, d takes c4 and bishop takes c4. Then the thing is that white has a more domination over here with respect to black. Just back to our main position where the knight b5 was the move by Karjakin and the reply was a6 by Anand. Knight to c7, e5, just blocking, though this rook is falling. Rook takes d5, e takes a4, queen takes e4, queen takes c7. Though there is some question can arise. Now it may be questioned why the rook jump over this d5 square to take it instead of why not c takes d5. Well, the reason is if pawn takes pawn, then the possibility is then after this move maybe you can take this, but the equation is quite same and similar, so it is not that much. Moreover, if queen move from this c2 square, then the knight will give a fork over this f2 square, so it's deadly. So just see the main line position. So rook takes d5 and e takes f4, queen takes e4, knight takes c7, and rook takes c5 and f takes e3, bishop to d3, and there is a direct threat of checkmate over this h7, so g6 was played. Now f takes e3 and bishop to e6, and now the final development has been completed from the side of black, and you can see the white has a little domination over black still here. So queen to h4, the idea is to bring the knight over here and give a checkmate over there. So rook from rook a to e8. Well, rook a to e8 is kind of four-sided move, but another suggestion from Stockfish is to, if in the response of queen to h4, queen to d6 is better. Queen to d6 implies the probable continuation from here is knight to g5, but here you can play h5. So the path is blocked, and queen to e4, again now you can play rook a to e8. If you don't play rook a to e8, then maybe if you play something like this, then the continuation be like that. After that, if you don't take this knight with your pawn, then you will lose either your rook or queen, and moreover if you take, then the queen has a great opportunity to come over here and give a checkmate. So none of them is desirable, so to prevent it, rook a8 is one of the fundamental issues, so that rook a8, if knight takes bishop, now rook takes knight and rook to d5, queen to e7, rook to f4, knight to e5, creating a pressure and maybe a checkmate in absence of this rook. So bishop to e2, rook to e8 and c5, maybe this is the probable continuation. Just back to main position. So after queen to h4 played by Karjakin, Anand reply was rook a to e8, bishop to e4 and queen to b6. Now queen to h6 played by Karjakin and f5 by Anand. Now f5 actually block the bishop and force this bishop to move from here. Maybe the question is why you cannot take this rook. The analysis is, if you just take a moment, we have taken the rook, queen takes c5. In that case, knight to g5, queen have to give a check, king to b1, and queen have to take this knight on g5, and queen takes queen. And in that case you'll have to sacrifice your queen in order to survive, so it's not desirable either. So queen to h6, and indeed f5 was played by Anand. Knight to g5, again there is a threat, so rook to f7. Now rook to f7 means you are just simply sacrifice your rook, but what happens if you don't play this rook to f7, instead you play rook to e7? Just take a look. In the case of rook e7, knight takes e6, and obviously there is a checkmate on this queen to f8, so you must avoid it. In that case you will take the knight and then you will face a pin, and surely you will lose rook, and the position is not good either. So that's why you cannot sacrifice a rook without reason. So logically rook f7 is better. Maybe you are losing it, but it gives you some position at least. Bishop to d5, obviously you can take the bishop, bishop takes d5. Now rook takes d5 and queen takes e3 check, king to b1, rook align the rook, rook h to d1 and queen e2. h4 by Karjakin. Maybe instead of h4, d6 was better, and the probable continuation will be like rook to g7, king to a1, knight to a5, rook to d8, knight takes c4, rook takes rook, queen takes rook. It was after the rook to d6, queen to c4. This is also a good variation. Rook takes g6 check, and h takes g6, queen takes g6, f8, queen f6 check, king to g8, king g6 check, king to f8. Maybe it's a draw because you can see it's very neutral. So back to our main position where h4 was played. Queen e2 and h4 was played by Karjakin, and Anand replied it with knight to e5. So knight to e5, the tendency of knight to e5 to jump over here and then here, if they still remain in that line, then you may lose one of your rooks. So knight to f3 played by Karjakin to make this line alive for his queen, and queen to e4 check. The original move played was king to a2. What happened if you play king to a1? King to a1, then the knight to g4, the queen is straight, those queens to c1 and knight to e3. Now pawn push on h5, then knight takes d5, c takes d5, queen to e3. So obviously queen will try to neutralize the other queen. So queen to c2, queen to e2, rook to d2, queen to f1 check, and rook to d2. Maybe this similar kind of. Just back to our main position. Now queen takes c4 check, king to a1. Now the king is partially safe. Knight to g4, the threat is still alive over here. Queen to c1 and queen takes c1. The exchange of queen has been done. So rook takes c1 and king to g7 and h5. It was inaccuracy. You have lost your pawn. The best move instead of h5 was rook to d6. The probable continuation with this was rook to f8, king b1, rook f6, rook d3, f4, rook d2, rook knight e3, rook c5, rook f5, rook c3, rook f8, rook c2 d3, and king h6. The chances of black is more over here. So instead of this line, Karjakin went for this h5, and Anand played knight to f6, and white actually resigns from here. Though this game is going favor of black, we can see over here from the analysis of Stockfish. I also attached another video with no commentary. It's just analysis of computer analysis. You can check that to find the ultimate position of the game. That's all for today. I hope you have liked the video. If you do like the video, don't forget to click on like button, and obviously don't forget to subscribe my channel, and don't forget to watch another video where I have shown the ultimate consequences, one of the ultimate consequences of the game. Till then, goodbye, take care.